If you're thinking, oh man, I'm not interested in Doctor Who, don't turn the video off just yet. I want to show you a photo. This is a photo from a Toys R Us in England in the mid-2000s. I know sometimes as Americans we assume that the big toy lines here are the big toy lines everywhere. But in this case, it was an action figure phenomenon that barely made a blip on our retail radar. At RetroBlasting, we're all about toys of retro properties, and Doctor Who was one of those franchises that didn't have a solid action figure range until the revival of the series with Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant. But when character options committed to the Doctor Who license, they went all in and didn't just make figures for the modern series, but all of the classic eras as well. It's a subject that's worth exploring even if you never want to collect it, because the toy line is so huge and it continues to this day. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm a newbie to all this. I only started getting into Doctor Who 3 years ago, and what I thought I'd do is provide a guide for beginners on how to collect a definitive core group of figures from this series, because the range of toys is quite daunting, with countless variations. Rather than give you my perspectives only, I've also enlisted the help of arguably the best Doctor Who action figure reviewer on YouTube, BatmanMarch, an excellent channel run by Matthew Toffolo. His channel is in the video description below. Check him out if you have any interest. You're gonna hear from Matthew and myself on our picks for the definitive Doctor Who figures to collect, because there are so many variants to sift through. We want to tell you which ones we would choose to put together a great core collection. So let's get started with the First Doctor.
Believe me, my dear, your future lies with David, and not with a silly old buffer like me.
So in terms of the definitive First Doctor figure, for me it would have to be the original San Diego Comic-Con 2-pack, which was the Dalek Invasion of Earth set with First Doctor and the Supreme Dalek. And the reason why I think that this is sort of like the essential look for the First Doctor is because that's the costume that he wore the most throughout his 3 years. Obviously there have been a few other variants of this version of the Doctor, but that costume presented here is the one that he wore predominantly throughout that time. So for me, that one wins as the definitive look.
For me, it's as much about display as it is being iconic. Yes, Matthew is absolutely right. The San Diego Comic-Con version of William Hartnell's First Doctor is the most versatile figure you can get. However, as I was making my choice, I was setting these figures up alongside one another. And I admit I landed on the version of the First Doctor packed with the First Doctor's TARDIS. It hits all the high notes. The hat, coat, and scarf make him stand out on a shelf alongside the other figures. And you almost get a twofer with this figure, because it also echoes the First Doctor as depicted by David Bradley in the Doctor Who special Twice Upon a Time.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.
For the Second Doctor, kind of similar with the First Doctor, again, it's the San Diego Comic-Con Tomb of the Cybermen pack with the Cyberman. Again, the reason why this one trumps other releases is because this is the version of the costume that he wore for most of his time as the Doctor. Obviously, there was like a 3 Doctors version that has come out, and there was the version from the 2 Doctors, but this version is how Troughton looked during his own period as the Doctor. So for me, that has to be the definitive look.
Agreed. The Tomb of the Cybermen Second Doctor is the definitive one to pick up for Patrick Troughton's incarnation. There is no contest here.
Too late, Brigadier. I've boiled out the contents. The weapons that you have on Earth are quite nasty enough as it is.
For the Third Doctor, this is where it gets trickier because there's so many variants of this figure, and he had so many variations of his costume within the programme. I know some people really like the red outfit, which we have sort of got a variation of in the 13 Doctors set, but for me, I would have to choose the San Diego Comic-Con Sea Devils pack, which was the Third Doctor in the blue velvet jacket with the black and red cloak. And the reason why I would pick this over, like I said, the red jacket or the green jacket, you know, all very lovely looking outfits, the reason why I would pick this one ahead of those is because he wore this version of the costume in what is one of my favourite stories, but he wore this costume quite a lot in his first 3 years as the Doctor. You know, the outfit that we get with this figure is very similar to what he wore throughout all of Season 7. and again, he wore a variation of it, minus the cravat, in season 8, and of course then he wore it in the Sea Devils. So I think there is something iconic about that look, and it's been done before on other bits of merchandise, like the Titan bust used that version of the costume. The upcoming Big Chief Studios figure is also going to use that version of the costume, so there is something iconic about that look.
While I can't deny that the Sea Devil's Third Doctor is the definitive Third Doctor figure, I'm gonna have to play the newbie card for my choice. John Pertwee's Doctor had so many different costumes, I was struggling to pick one that would go alongside the first 2 Doctors. The Sea Devil's outfit is largely another black ensemble. That would be 3 in a row. I was leaning toward his figure from the Time Warrior because he's in green, which makes a nice contrast, and the Time Warrior is Sarah Jane Smith's first appearance as well. However, Melinda cracked a joke about Pertwee's costume while I was watching Planet of the Daleks, and that sealed the deal for me. For my display, it's the Third Doctor from Planet of the Daleks.
I never meant to call you any pain.
Homo sapiens. What an inventive, invincible species.
For the Fourth Doctor, again, we're in tricky territory because he had a lot of different costume variations as well, and all of those are iconic in their own way. And the version that I'm going to choose as my definitive version isn't actually my favourite version of the costume. My favourite version of the costume is the Pyramids of Mars outfit, but for definitive reasons, I'm going to say the original Wave 1 release that came with the pieces of the K1 robot. And the reason why I choose this is the version of the costume that then inspired all the other variations. It's also the version of the costume that we've seen used on publicity images, more so than I think any other, and also been used on merchandise more so than any other, if you think of things like the Product Enterprise talking Tom Baker figure, and also the fact that they were going to do a 12-inch doll in that same costume. Even the Dennis Fisher figure back in the 70s had a very similar looking costume. So I think for me, there's just something about it. Like I said, it is sort of like the prototype for all the costumes that came later. It sort of just distills everything about that Doctor, you know, the bohemian, the sort of undergraduate sort of student look that he had. It's also the headshot that we get in the title sequence. I think that one, even though it's not my favourite version of his costume, has to be considered the sort of definitive toy.
I concur with Matthew. This is the ultimate Fourth Doctor figure of Tom Baker. Some people say I'm biased about that, and I honestly don't understand it.
Well, how does the celery help?
If the gas is present, the celery turns purple.
And then what do you do?
I eat the celery.
The Fifth Doctor, he's a little bit easier because although there are various variations of this figure, there aren't many costume differences for Peter Davison's Doctor in the series. So for that reason, I would go with season 19. Again, this was the costume that he wore the longest out of his 3-year run, and personally, I just prefer it. And the version of the figure that I would go for is the version that appeared in the 11 Doctors set, because it has the stick of celery on the lapel. Obviously, there are other variations, one with the hat, for instance, but, you know, he only wore that occasionally, and I think for me, the silhouette of the Fifth Doctor is minus the hat.
Matthew is right, if for no other reason than the figure in question has the best head sculpt of Peter Davison. Personally, I wanted a version of the Fifth Doctor from the Caves of Androzani, what I consider to be the best Fifth Doctor story, and also so it would display well alongside the figure of his companion, Perry, also as seen in Caves of Androzani. Unfortunately, the closest figure to the Caves of Androzani version comes in the 13 Doctors box set, and his head looks truly weird, so I confess I swapped the head with an earlier figure to get my desired Fifth Doctor. But Matthew is right, this one here, the original one, is the best one offered right out of the box.
I was in fact taking you to Earth.
Bit of an anticlimax after that journey.
Ungrateful wretch.
Again, for the Sixth Doctor, following very similarly to the Fifth Doctor, not many variations of the costume on screen. I would have to say it's the original Wave 1 release, which represents his look in season 22. And again, that is simply because that is the costume that he predominantly wore the most. And unfortunately, the only other variation that we've got from the TV series is from Terror of the Vervoids, which he only wore for, what, 3 or 4 episodes? So yeah, I think for me, it has to be He wore this costume from season 22 predominantly throughout his 2 years as the Doctor, so that one has to be the definitive version.
Matthew said it all. Unless you like a yellow tie instead of a blue one, the original release of Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor is the definitive one to get.
It's a missile convoy.
A nuclear missile convoy.
How do you know?
It has a graveyard stench.
The Seventh Doctor, again, he only had 2 variations of costume in the TV series, apart from his TV movie look. This one's tricky because I like both versions of the costume, but for me, I would have to say the cream version from the Remembrance of the Daleks 2-pack has to win out. There's just something, I just really like that early season 24, season 25 look.
That cream jacket is definitely Sylvester McCoy's most well-known look from Doctor Who. But you might be looking for some more contrast in your figure display since the Fifth Doctor also looks like a vanilla fudgesicle. To that end, you could go with the Seventh Doctor from the Seventh Doctor and TARDIS gift set that comes with the brown jacket instead. Just an option.
Who are you?
I was dead too long this time. The anesthetic almost destroyed the regenerative process.
For McGann, obviously we've had a new version of his costume in the modern series with the Night of the Doctor, which is also a lovely figure. But in terms of the definitive look, I would have to go with his first TV appearance, which is the TV movie version. And the reason why is because that was the look of the Eighth Doctor. Because that was the predominant look, and we'd never seen any real variation upon that other than slightly different colourings in the comic books or what have you. That has to be the definitive look for that version of the Doctor, regardless of how nice the modern variation is. You know, even Big Chief Studios are deciding to use that as their first Eighth Doctor figure, and I think it's just a testament to how lovely that look is.
Alas, there was only one substantial live-action performance with Paul McGann as the Doctor. And this was it. This version came with the 11 Doctors box set, and it's the one you want.
I'm getting out. I'm gonna find my friends. And then I'm gonna find you.
The Ninth Doctor, again, not an awful lot of variation with this figure, mainly just repaints of the jumper.
Aren't you going to change?
I've changed my jumper.
But for me, in terms of definitive version, you could probably go for anything, but I think I would have to go for the burgundy version in that neutral stance. Obviously, there was a sort of a disco dancing Doctor, as fans have lovingly called it over the years. But I like the burgundy version in the neutral stance, just because the neutral stance looks far better, and the sculpt's a lot nicer. And I just think that it's definitive in as much as this is the outfit that we see him in originally. I think it's probably the outfit that he wears predominantly throughout the 13 episodes. I could be totally wrong there. I'm sure there's a fan out there who will say, actually, he wore the blue jumper more than he wore the red burgundy one. But I think that just stands out. It's just a very eye-catching look.
There aren't a lot of choices here, and you definitely don't want the pre-posed Christopher Eccleston.
Desperately seeking someone willing to travel.
This one from the 11 Doctors box set is the best compromise.
So you travel a lot?
All the time, just for fun. Well, that's the plan. Never quite works.
In terms of the 10th Doctor, for me, it would have to be the brown suit with the blue pinstripes with the brown trench coat. Again, this was one of the first figures in the toy line, and it was obviously the original outfit that he wore. The hair, unfortunately, does look more like his hair in Series 2, which he only had for a few episodes in that series before it became the more traditional spiky hair that we're all used to. Sadly, a lot of the figures don't feature that, particularly without the glasses. So, unfortunately, it has to be this sort of early Series 2 version. But for the most part, I mean, it's still a lovely figure. Obviously, things like the articulation are a bit outdated now compared to their later figures. But overall, you know, it creates the silhouette of the Doctor that we recognise. And it is really, at the end of the day, the outfit that he wore predominantly throughout his time as the Doctor.
The standard David Tennant is really the de facto choice. However, if you are fearless, you can take the 10th Doctor from the 11 Doctors set and pull his glasses off his head, and you have a second option for display with a spikier TV-accurate hairstyle.
Hello. I'm the Doctor.
For Matt Smith, Also similar in terms of, you know, it's very much the same outfit, just with different coloured shirts or bow ties or whatever. For me, I think as a definitive, it would have to be that red pinstriped shirt with the red bow tie. And the reason being is just because, again, it was the first outfit that he wore as the Doctor, and it was the outfit that he wore predominantly during Series 5. That's not to say that I don't like the Series 7 version, which is what I actually kind of prefer. I love that sort of long purple frock coat with the waistcoat. But I think that in terms of the initial image that you conjure in your mind of the 11th Doctor, it has to be that tweed jacket that he wore in those first two series.
Including the bow tie.
Yeah, it's cool. Bow ties are cool.
Yeah, Matthew's right. That Matt Smith. That one. That one's cool.
So you saved everyone?
No, I just saved you, and I let everyone else suffocate.
All the other ones I've said that, you know, the definitive version is the costume that Doctor wore the most. But for this one, I'm going to go with my favourite costume, which is the burgundy jacket and the white shirt. Unfortunately, not painted with the waistcoat on, or not sculpted with the waistcoat on, for reasons that we'll never fully understand. But the reason why I'm going to go with this one is because I think, as much as I like the normal version of that figure with the sort of blue version of the coat, I was never keen on the hoodie outfit. The reason why I go for this one is because I think the velvet look was sort of like the ultimate distillation of where they really got the costume right. This is the only toy that replicates that velvet look, and it just worked so well for the 12th Doctor. Unfortunately, this is a tricky figure to get because it is exclusive to a shop in the United Kingdom. However, I do think, yeah, this is the best look, and it does have its issues. Unlike the other figures that I've listed so far, you know, they've all been really top-notch. This one does have problems in as much as it doesn't have the waistcoat, for instance. However, I can put that aside because even then, the look of the figure is so nice. It does resemble what we see on screen quite well. And it's a great head sculpt, much better than the Series 8 head sculpt, in my opinion. So yeah, this version, although only worn a few times during his time as the Doctor, has to be my definitive look for the 12th Doctor.
While I agree that the hoodie isn't the most exciting ensemble, I can't shake the fact that Peter Capaldi wore the hoodie and the dark t-shirt in what I firmly believe is one of the greatest moments in all of Doctor Who history, his speech in the Zygon inversion.
When you've killed all the bad guys, and when it's all perfect and just and fair, when you have finally got it exactly the way you want it, what are you going to do with the people like you?
For that reason alone, that's the one I wanted. But I did take Matthew's advice from his own channel and swap the feet with one of the earlier Capaldis, so he wasn't so freakishly tall.
I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor.
As far as Jodie Whittaker is concerned, there isn't a choice. This right here is all she wrote thus far from character options. As you can see, jumping into this action figure line is like jumping into time and space itself. There are a lot of options, and it can be intimidating for the Doctor Who novice. In the near future, in an upcoming video, Matthew and I will guide you through our picks for the best companions, villains, and blue police boxes in the character options figure line.